the ground that Ukraine has lost genuinely is devastating for European considerations, for American considerations. It is a big blow to America's power around the globe. All right, let's go to First Thought, who had a coverage on the matter from 7 hours ago, how the Russia-Ukraine war will end. For the sake of brevity, this video will focus solely on the state of the war and not the internal politics of the involved parties, such as the influence of far-right elements in Ukraine or the reception of mass mobilization in Russia. It's so funny how the same people will be like, I can't believe, you know, people speaking out against communism in Cuba get arrested, while they simultaneously watch that same exact shit happening in America and don't comprehend that, like, these two things are in line with one another. Beyond that, the United States of America obviously still has the highest prisoner per capita population out of every other OECD nation in general, and every other nation, as a matter of fact. So
February.
What are we talking about? Land of the free, my ass.
4th, 2022. Russia invades Ukraine by launching a full-scale offensive. Strategically important areas such as Kyiv, power plants, and other major infrastructure are attacked with missile salvos. Infantry pours in from the north, east, and south, including amphibious landings in the critical port cities of Odessa and Mariupol. Russia's overwhelming numbers and superior firepower led most observers to predict that Ukraine would fall within just a few weeks. However, much to everyone's surprise, Ukraine not only survived the initial onslaught, they pushed most Russian forces back to their own borders, except in the Donbass, where the two strongest Russian-aligned separatist groups operate. Despite this initial success and notable instances of Ukraine achieving gains thought impossible, such as sinking several major Russian naval ships and hitting targets inside Russia, Ukraine has been on the back foot, suffering military defeats, shortages of critical supplies and munitions, political instability, and the increasingly faltering United States. Is Ukraine on the verge of...
It's not per capita anymore, but we do have the largest prisoner population in totality. Wait, oh, did El Salvador beat us? Is that what it is?
...of defeat? But before we answer that question, I'd like to take a quick moment to thank our channel sponsor, Aura. As you all know, we make political content here and on our other channels. Unfortunately, that means some people don't like us very much. These days, a quick Google search is all it takes to find someone's personal information. Data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, health records, your relatives, it's all readily available for those who want to find it. That's why I've been using Aura to help keep my private details private. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. This not only cuts down on the amount of spam I get, but also helps keep all my accounts safe from bad actors. I'll give you a real-world example. AT&T recently revealed that over 73 million...
Do you think there's a long-term hope for socialism in Russia? No.
Customer records, both existing and former customers, were released on the dark web. They recommended that those affected change their passwords, monitor account activity, and consider credit freezes or fraud alerts from credit bureaus. This was a huge breach, but I don't have to worry. Aura does all of this for me.
I don't get it. I thought it was Israel that didn't accept the agreement. Qatar threatens to expel Hamas if terror group rejects ceasefire deal, report says. U.S. official says Doha have been warning Hamas for months about possible expulsion, moving to concrete threats following repeated requests from Biden and public criticism from Israel. What are you asking me? I don't get it. I thought it was Israel that didn't accept the agreement. Do you think Israel is accepting the agreement? Don't you think that this is basically just following along with the whole, like, don't pay attention to Israel refusing to acknowledge this agreement? It's actually Hamas that's, refusing to accept it. That's just America moving along with the commentary that they, or with the consent that they want to manufacture. He's saying, why is Qatar threatening Hamas when they should know Hamas is accepting? Because Qatar is operating as a staging ground for these negotiations because of the United States of America. Qatar is not operating on their own individual framework at all. They just do what America wants them to do. And America is saying, increase the pressure, make it seem as though the responding party is actually Israel. The party that's responding positively is actually Israel. It's Hamas that's like disagreeing. What do you mean? U.S. State Department spokesperson Matt Miller said on Wednesday that the U.S. has observed both Egypt and Qatar exert significant pressure on Hamas, though he declined to elaborate on the specifics of these efforts. Like what? We've seen both countries play an incredibly important role in mediating this deal, making it clear that this deal is in the interest of the Palestinian people and doing so appropriately. U.S. officials privately noted that Egypt is applying more pressure on Hamas than in the past, though the extent of Egypt's private dialogue with the group remains unclear. The U.S. continues to advocate for the deal, with Biden and 16 other world leaders urging Hamas to accept it. That's ironic because it's actually Biden and 16 other world leaders urging Israel to accept it, emphasizing Israel's readiness to move forward. This is literally just like reverse world, a bizarro world. However, U.S. officials admit that there is no backup plan if Hamas rejects the deal. Hamas's expected refusal, as reported by the Hezbollah-affiliated Lebanese newspaper Al Akhbar, stems from clear statements by Israeli ministers and Knesset members indicating an intention to resume the war after a hostage deal, which is not the deal. That's a whole different deal. It's not a deal at all. There you go. It took us, 8 paragraphs to get to the meat of the matter? The report claimed that these statements explicitly revealed Israel's plan to renew hostilities post-deal. Hamas demands a clear framework to end the war with actionable mechanisms, dismissing U.S. guarantees as insufficient. Does that elaborate? Does that help you understand with a little bit more clarity what is going on? Biden claims Israel has a proposal that is a 3-phase proposal that is also almost identical to the Hamas proposal that was given on February, in the month of February. Israel turns around and basically thinks that they can hide the true intentions of continuing hostilities, even though you have the term ceasefire in there. Well, we don't know if Israel actually put the term ceasefire in there, but at least Biden presented it as Israel's deal when he said ceasefire and a full-blown cessation of hostilities in phase 2. Israel turns around and goes, oh, no, we didn't mean it like that. We want to keep bombing, actually, with no clear indication of cessation of hostilities at all. As a matter of fact, we're going to keep going on with our military conquest to dismantle Hamas and destroy Hamas, both politically and militarily, which is basically going back. And under normal terms, it's a rug pull. Yeah, as Shatter said. It's basically saying like, no, you don't understand. We're going to keep doing what we want to do. It's not a deal at all. So if you, and even in the article, they very openly and clearly state that, yeah, dude, Hamas demands a clear framework to end the war with actionable mechanisms is incredibly valid. They're saying, do the deal that you said you're going to do. I'm a bit sad. I like that we're moving on and going, I'm a bit sad Hamas isn't accepting the deal. Bro, it's not a deal. It's not the deal, okay? Hamas saying, we will accept the deal that you put forward, but if it's not the deal that you put forward and you just keep blowing up Palestinian homes, then that's not a ceasefire deal at all. It took you 0 seconds. Look at what I am. Look at this. Look at what's in front of you. Even this is Ynet. It's obviously biased. And even then, why would you assume Israel would ceasefire in the ceasefire deal is so funny. I'm a bit sad Hamas isn't accepting the deal. I have no illusion of positive intentions from Israel, but I feel like the refusal will be used as an excuse to justify more slaughter if they accept the deal and Israel reneged it. It would ratchet up pressure and more. Hard to be optimistic, just afraid more people are going to die. I can't tell if this is like Hasbara bots have been deployed in the chat or something as soon as we looked at this article. Just saying, when they keep doing it, there will be more pressure. What do you mean? There's no deal at all then. Like Israel's like, yeah, no, give us the hostages and we'll continue our genocide. That's insane. That's not a deal. That's not the deal. A ceasefire means a ceasefire, okay? No more blowing up Palestinian houses. It is also so laughable because like every Israeli mouthpiece so far has been like, no, we're going to keep blowing up Palestinian houses. F this deal. This deal sucks dick. It's our deal, but it also sucks. We don't want it. And these guys are like, oh man, I'm so sad that Hamas is not accepting the deal, where Israel takes out the hostages and then continues killing every Palestinian. Okay. Like, I don't know how to describe to you the past week of action. It's been 7 full days since Joseph Robinette Brandon turned around and said, this is Israel's deal. And yet, for some weird reason, Israel has not agreed to its own deal. Does that not make sense to you? Does that not weird you out even a little bit? 2 Israeli officials said they'll resign if accepted. That's another part of it.
And best of all, I don't have to download a bunch of different apps just because some company couldn't keep my data secure. I value my privacy, and I'm sure you value yours. You can go to aura.com/firstthought to start your 2-week free trial. No strings attached. Try it out, and I promise you'll appreciate the peace of mind. Support the show and protect your valuable data by signing up today at the link below. First, some history and clarification. This war didn't start in February of 2022. It began in the early 1990s during negotiations over the reunification of Germany, when US Secretary of State James Baker and German Chancellor Helmut Kohl promised Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev that NATO would not expand eastwards. These discussions were revealed through declassified documents and part of a broader diplomatic effort to integrate a unified Germany into NATO, without exacerbating reasonable Soviet security concerns. However, these assurances were never codified by formal agreements of any kind, which allowed the US to ignore their promise entirely. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, NATO began to admit nations from Central and Eastern Europe, and now encompasses nearly all of the former Eastern Bloc, except Belarus, Ukraine, and Georgia, though not for lack of trying. Fast forward to 2014 in Ukraine after the Orange Revolution. The Donbas region in eastern Ukraine, characterized by a significant Russian-speaking population and industrial base, perceived the ousting of Russia-friendly President Viktor Yanukovych as a direct threat to its economic and cultural interests. The subsequent Russian annexation of Crimea in March 2014, following a controversial referendum, further raised tensions and set the stage for a violent conflict. Local actors in Donbas, including former members of the security forces, aligned with Russian interests to oppose the new Ukrainian government. Russia conducted overt and covert operations aimed at destabilizing Ukraine to prevent it joining NATO, and their support for the separatists in Donbas included military equipment and strategic guidance. Ukraine's response to the crisis only exacerbated the issue, and the state's weakness, evident in its inability to integrate diverse regional interests, particularly those of the East, significantly worsened the conflict. Ukraine began receiving warnings from the US about a Russian invasion in November of 2021. Reports emerged of significant Russian military buildups near Ukraine's border, which led the US to significantly increase its intelligence sharing and consultations with allies. The NATO Secretary General asked Russia to clarify its military activities near Ukraine's border, pointing to an abnormal concentration of approximately 90,000 troops, a number that rose to roughly 100,000 by early February. In late January, the US cautioned Belarus against supporting any Russian military initiatives, since Belarus was hosting a separate large contingent of 127,000 Russian troops for so-called military exercises. Despite these foreboding signs of a looming invasion, there remained understandable skepticism based on previous instances where similar Russian military buildup did not lead to open conflict. To add to the confusion, the US track record of lying about intelligence to further a policy agenda isn't great, to put it lightly. Concurrent with all this, the US escalated its own military presence in Eastern Europe by deploying an additional 1,000 troops and several fighter jets to enhance its air defenses.
He said that line for you, bro. I mean, it's true, including, but not limited to, the Ukrainian officials themselves saying, like, everybody calm the f down.
In Romania and Poland. Aside from bolstering the defenses of neighboring...
It's correct. America says foreign adversaries are going to attack every goddamn day. You know, sometimes they're right. This was one of those instances where they were right.
NATO allies. The US, of course, stepped in to supply Ukraine with the arms it needed to resist the invasion once it began.
You were so adamant. This is such a dumb take, especially because it's been years at this point. Like, I mean, if you still want to run that line, you can. I mean, yeah, you're right. I recognize that I was wrong. I think my career as a political commentator is pretty solid. If that's the one thing that people have, is that, like, I thought that it would be an unimaginable wrong and genuinely harmful for the prospects of Russia that they would invade Ukraine, you know? Yeah.
We can't give you an exhaustive list of everything the US has pledged or sent to Ukraine, but here's just a sample of what was included in the $800 million package from March 2022. 800 Stinger anti-aircraft systems, 2,000 Javelin and 1,000 light anti-armor weapons, over 20 million rounds of small arms ammunition, drones, grenade launchers, rifles, pistols, machine guns and shotguns, body armor and helmets, and myriad other pieces of equipment. Another security package worth $250 million included high-impact military equipment such as air defense systems, artillery, and anti-tank weapons.
The alternative was NATO infrastructure in Ukraine? No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. No, there is no NATO infrastructure in Ukraine, especially when Russia had already annexed Crimea, especially when there was ongoing conflict in two Eastern Ukrainian territory, Eastern Ukrainian towns. Doors open. It was 100% sure, dude.
But these packages, worth over $1 billion combined, are just a drop in the bucket.
Oblasts.
Direct aid aimed at assisting Ukraine tops $107 billion. And the total figure of congressionally approved aid since February 2022 is around $175 billion. Non-military financial support has also been crucial, with Western governments and international institutions like the World Bank providing significant economic assistance. For example, the World Bank committed $13 billion to stabilize Ukraine's economy and support reconstruction efforts. However, as with all such help, it comes with the catch of Western neoliberal reforms and anti-corruption measures supposedly meant to address long-term economic challenges. Initial U.S. support for Ukraine against Russian aggression emphasized, quote, the preservation of global democracy and a rules-based international order. One major reason for the enthusiasm early in the war was Ukraine's significant progress in resisting Russian advances using Western military aid, suggesting this was a viable strategy for Western powers. Unfortunately for Ukraine, this overwhelming support would begin to fade on October 7th, 2023, for some reason. Anyway, since whatever happened on that date, Western governments have displayed significant apprehension, with numerous instances of delays and even reversals of aid pledges, reflecting serious uncertainty about Ukraine's prospects for total victory, a completely unified Ukraine. Western nations have struggled to maintain consistent aid. For example, the European Union promised to deliver 1 million shells by March 2024 and fell short, only delivering 30% of that. The Biden regime went from indefinite support to suggesting that the US will provide assistance as long as we can. And in a report titled Scenarios on the Russian War in Ukraine for 2024 and 2025, they outline scenarios where Western fatigue leads to a negotiated settlement, with Western partners pushing Ukraine towards a compromise due to a lack of visible military breakthrough. Slovakia, while advocating for Ukraine's EU membership and recently witnessing an attempted assassination of their prime minister, has shown hesitance in fully supporting sanctions against Russia, due to its dependence on Russian energy. France has sent weapons to Ukraine but has been non-committal about an energy embargo, and has kept the details of its military aid opaque. Germany, heavily reliant on Russian gas, reversed its ban on weapons transfers but continues to avoid an EU-wide oil and gas embargo. In a bid to safeguard future aid, Western allies are considering moving the US-led Ukraine Defense Contact Group under NATO control to ensure a steady flow of arms irrespective of political changes within individual nations. To add to this uncertainty, a severe lack of timely and adequate shipments of weaponry have significantly impacted Ukraine's ability to counter Russian advances effectively. Crucial systems like F-16 fighter jets that were needed in 2023 will only become operational in 2024, by which time, Ukrainian officials say, Russia will have adapted its strategies to counter them. Western failures, such as the shortage of ammunition and delayed support, have directly contributed to Ukrainian military setbacks.
I hate this war because I've seen quite a few friends transition from being revolutionary leftists to weird Max Blumenthal, RWA, Russian nationalists. Ukraine is the colonizer, Russia is the colonized. Putin's always doing masterstroke weirdos. Yeah. It is a very odd attitude to have. I don't understand it. It literally doesn't make sense because Russia doesn't even the Russian government doesn't even try to claim that they are even remotely revolutionary, Marxist, socialist, and in any case, so I don't even understand why they would be so duped. And I think it comes from these leftists are most likely all in the USA. Yeah, I think it comes from just the understandable resentment that people have to Western chauvinism that leaves no room for Western leftists to think about chauvinism in other nations and irredentist or imperialist actions from other nations that are also themselves capitalist. I don't know. I think that's probably the reason. That's most likely where it stems from. Because it's on the one hand, you have the oligarchy of the United States of America. On the other hand, you have the oligarchy of Russia, a kleptocracy that is also hyper-nationalistic, engaging in their own violent blood and soil conquest in Ukraine. Because Putin often talks about the glory of the USSR, but American leftists can't comprehend that he means Russian imperialism. But not really. He is much quicker to acknowledge that he is not a socialist by any means and is, as a matter of fact, very much a capitalist. It's odd to me how Western nations don't support Ukraine, supposedly don't have weapons, while simultaneously supporting Israel, a genocidal state, with said weapons they don't have. No, I think a lot of folks on the left think that Putin is bad, but the U.S. and NATO causes conflict. I mean, the U.S. and NATO have definitely significantly contributed to the conflict. That's not ridiculous. But ultimately, Russia is a nation state in and of itself. The United States and NATO absolutely contributed to this. Having said that, however, it is still an illegal invasion that the Russian government engaged in, you know? I mean, I hate NATO, as you guys know. I'm pretty open about my overall distaste for NATO. I don't believe that it's a defensive posture in the way that many Western chauvinists immediately assume it is. But it's not like that doesn't mean that Russia's calculations here or Russia's actions here are in any way, shape, or form justifiable, especially considering that most of these European countries had already openly said that they were not interested in allowing Ukraine into NATO ever.
Ukrainian military officials estimate.
Yeah. Oh, as far as the USSR goes, like it's not about, for many people, it's not about socialism at all. It's just about being a global power. It's the sense of pride and nostalgia that many people, even like people in Georgia, feel towards the USSR, not because they have like an ideological commitment to real existing socialism and an attempt to develop a socialist state or whatever. It's just more so that they like that it was a global superpower that was able to go toe to toe with the United States of America. That's what it is. So in a way, it's not all that dissimilar to having it be the glory of the Tsarist Russian Empire. It's just too far away for people to remember that. Whereas the USSR is not that far away. It's in recent history.
That an additional 250,000 shells per month are needed just to keep pace with Russian forces. So, overall, Ukraine's prospects aren't looking good, and the West is at risk of losing yet another war. Here are just a few of the problems they face. The Kharkiv region has been a recent focal point of Russian advances. Despite fierce resistance, Ukrainian forces have struggled to hold their positions. Notable Russian advances have occurred near Kremina and Bilohorivka, where Ukraine was unable to halt the momentum of the Russian 20th Combined Arms Army and other units. Intense bombardments, including a significant increase in glide bomb strikes, further crippled Ukrainian defenses in Kharkiv Oblast. The battle for Bakhmut presents one of the most intense and costly for Ukrainian forces. Elements of the 7th Reconnaissance and Assault Brigade and the 331st VDV Regiment have been particularly active in attempting to advance towards Kalinivka, northeast of Bakhmut. The sustained Russian assaults have led to incremental territorial gains for Russia.
Blinken said just a week ago that Ukraine will join NATO. Dude, oh, come on. Be for real, dude. Like, yeah, so did George W. Bush on his way out, okay? Which kind of started this whole thing for both Georgia and Ukraine in general. Like, yes, they also said, we will supply you all the defenses necessary. And they also said, you're going to win the war. You're going to purge all the Russian orcs. Not everything that the American State Department says is always going to correspond to the reality.
Russia in the region. Ukraine has also faced severe shortages of personnel. In the southern region, Russian forces have advanced in Donetsk Oblast, capturing key positions west and northwest of Bakhmut, including Bodanivka and parts of Chasiv Yar, a major defensive stronghold due to its elevation. Elements of the Russian 98th Airborne Division, supported by the 11th Separate VDV Brigade and 150th Motorized Rifle Division, have been particularly aggressive in their attacks near Ivanivska and east of Chasiv Yar. The Ukrainian military has also faced severe shortages.
I think the quicker you recognize that Russia's actions in Ukraine are not done out of some like symbolic realignment with a socialist cause attached to it, and is simply another capitalist nation run by oligarchs with a despotic madman leading the charge, a very authoritarian one, as a matter of fact, the easier it is for you to understand this calculation. Russia's actions against Ukraine are not inherently anti-imperial. It is not defensive. Okay, there are defensive measures that you can apply through trade and through developing trade relations, as Russia was doing, and making sure that European or American interference in Ukrainian affairs do not go beyond like the regular civil society organizations that they were propping up, and maybe some protests here and there, protests that turn into government changes and whatnot, but ultimately never direct NATO involvement, like building missile bases pointed at Moscow. But NATO represents a threat to Russia. No, do you support NATO growing? No, it is because of that I think, on top of all of the cruelty and on top of all the violence, that I'm additionally frustrated with not only Vladimir Putin's actions, but also those who defend him. because Vladimir Putin's actions are a gift to NATO. Vladimir Putin, by invading Ukraine and also showing that he was incapable completely of dismantling the Ukrainian leadership, basically show that he was in many ways a threat that needs security assurances against, while simultaneously showing that he's not that big of a threat that like other countries like Finland and Sweden, which had dual neutrality agreements with the USSR in the past, can actually go and join NATO without fear of like actual bombing campaigns and actual on the ground military invasion. If Russia had the smoke for Ukraine, if Russia had the actual smoke for Ukraine and was able to capture Kiev, decapitate the leadership, and put in like some kind of, I don't know, military leadership or some kind of pro-Kremlin leadership in Ukraine in a swift manner, as is the case with the military operation, special military operation, as was the ultimate goal of it, and could have immediately had air superiority, which they didn't, then the calculation would be very different from a realpolitik perspective. Okay, it would be different for Finland or all these other countries to. They would calculate the situation differently. They would look at it and go, okay, maybe they do have some smoke. Maybe we won't join NATO. Calling it a special operation? No, I'm not calling it a special operation. I'm saying they called it a special operation, which obviously it wasn't. Are you stupid or that horny to catch me slipping with my secret loyalty to Vladimir Putin or something? There is no world in which I consider this a special operation. I never have. I called it an invasion from day one, you idiot. God damn, people are so desperate. Agreed, that was Putin's biggest mistake. Now, due to lost lives, he can't back down because if he does, it's pretty much the end of his political career. Anyway.
Of personnel. Efforts to staff new units have been hampered by the need for extensive Western military assistance to train new recruits. Meanwhile, there's strong pressure from Russian advances, which necessitate continuous replenishment of manpower and materiel, something Ukraine just cannot balance at the moment. To address this, Ukraine passed a new draft law on April 11, 2024 that aims to address the urgent need for more soldiers. The new law mandates that all eligible men aged 18 to 60 register for military service. It removes defined service terms, that is, limiting service to a defined time period, and it increases compensation for volunteers. The law also includes provisions allowing individuals with certain criminal convictions to serve, and mandates local government and police support in the conscription process. These changes have sparked significant public opposition due to concerns over indefinite duration of service, human rights, and the psychological impact on conscripts and their families. Russian missile and drone strikes have targeted Ukraine's energy infrastructure, significantly disrupting the country's thermal power plants and leading to widespread power outages. Russian forces have damaged or disrupted roughly 80% of electricity generation at these plants, exploiting the degraded Ukrainian air defense umbrella to collapse the country's energy grid. This has further strained Ukraine's military logistics and overall war effort.
Like, they're not even remotely playing fair either, like Russia, I mean, in terms of like rules of engagement. The entire country, for the most part, even including Western territory, is still seen as like fair play. It's just awful. Anyway.
As the energy grid's degradation has compounded operational difficulties and disrupted civilian life. All in all, Ukraine's prospects don't look good. It appears the West is willing to sell it for peace, and allow Russia to keep the land they took during their military operation. So, appeasement. French President Emmanuel Macron has indicated the possibility of deploying French troops to Ukraine. This potential deployment includes several scenarios aimed at bolstering Ukrainian defenses and deterring further Russian advances. One scenario involves defending strategic locations, like Odessa, in the event of significant Russian advances. A strong French contingent could be deployed to secure the strategic port city, ensuring Ukraine's access to the sea. Another scenario considers establishing safe zones along Ukraine's border with Belarus, securing critical areas and freeing Ukrainian troops for combat operations in the east, thus preventing new Russian offensives. One question we should address is, if Russian troops were to kill French troops in the Ukrainian theater of war, would that automatically trigger Article 5? Thankfully, no. And the key word here is automatically. First, French troops deployed in Ukraine without NATO's collective decision would not automatically trigger Article 5. France would need to convince other NATO members that the attack constituted an attack on NATO itself. Second, since Article 5 requires a consensus among NATO members, each member would need to agree.
I cannot comprehend a world in which this is seen as like politically appropriate by the overarching French population, that they go to Ukraine and fight against Russian forces in Ukraine and die in Ukraine. Come on, bro. Article 5 is a joke considering the Turkish perspective. Yes. Well, but you have to remember, that's Turkey. Second largest army in NATO. Okay. So Turkey gets to do war on other NATO nations when it feels like it, including but not limited to French deployment in Libya. As a matter of fact, I think that there was some back and forth there too. It wasn't just Greece. A lot of people go, oh, well, what about Turkey and Greece? And it's like, didn't know you were so pro Putin, but it's fine. What? Are people hallucinating? What is going on? Or are you just like trying to hit a top of the hour ad break debate? Is that what's happening? Because the only thing I'm in favor of is you avoiding those ads at the top of the hour. Okay. I can't speak on Ukraine's defenses, but I can tell you can defend yourself against the 3-minute ad break at the top of the hour by subscribing. Deploying tripwire troops into an active war zone is ass backwards nonsense. There's no reason to send troops unless you go to full-scale war. Yeah. Anyway, it's like de facto sanctions, the defenses against the top of the hour ad break, by subscribing. Here's the 3-minute ad break now. You were first to criticize Israel for attempting to create a mono-ethnic society, but what about Ukraine, who after 2014 Maidan was doing the same? Bro, that's insane. Like, don't get me started on this shit, okay? Oh my God, come on, dude. Yeah, Ukraine is doing Israel.
That the circumstances warrant a collective response, and given the divided political stances within NATO, achieving such consensus is unlikely, especially for a deployment not officially sanctioned by NATO. And third, historically, NATO...
Ukraine has lost, the West and especially Europe is desperate, they created a monster. That part I don't disagree with as much. I do think that the ground that Ukraine has lost genuinely is devastating for European considerations, for American considerations. It is a big blow to America's power around the globe. It certainly does not look good. America can keep saying like, well, we're doing a war of attrition. We're destroying the Russian military and not a single active duty service member is dying in the process. Awesome. But ultimately, it's not so awesome.
NATO has been cautious about direct military involvement in non-member countries to avoid escalation with Russia. So even if French troops were attacked, NATO might respond with non-military measures, such as more sanctions, rather than direct military retaliation. Ukraine's plight and likely eventual loss in this war marks another chapter in the decline of Western hegemonic power. Despite some surprising victories early in the conflict, Ukraine's chances of overcoming Russia's relentless advances now appear slim. The West's support, while substantial, has faltered.
What? Most of us in EU are together against Russia. I like you, but sometimes I think you don't understand how bad Russia/Putin is. They are like Israel to Palestinians. First of all, Russia and its actions in Ukraine are similar to Israel. That's not like they are the invading party. They are the party that is in the wrong. But beyond that, if you think that like what Russia is doing to Ukraine right now is like, is similar to, I mean, even on the metrics, they're not close. Putin is not good, but Putin doesn't have to be as bad as Israel to be in the wrong. I said last year when Ukrainian counteroffensive failed that Russia is going to hold on until the West loses interest. Russia wins here and has secured a land bridge to Crimea and Black Sea. I don't know what these shadows want you to say. Why does Putin have to be Hitler for these people to support Ukraine? They want this because I think a lot of people, without considering what it means to go into all-out war with a nuclear-armed nation, just kind of want America to dominate. Maybe. I don't know. I actually don't know. I think that a lot of people are looking at this and going, no, Putin is Putler. He is like Hitler. You're appeasing Hitler. We have to fight until every Russian is dead. I don't know. You called BB Hitler, Lamau? I mean, yeah. Vladimir Putin is a despot. He's very violent. He's ultra nationalistic. He is a fascist, especially, for sure. But yeah, I think that Benjamin Netanyahu and Zionism is a closer analog to the fascism that we saw in Nazi Germany than even than even the Russian ultranationalism is. There's definitely sex in Russian ultranationalism that is identical to Hitlerian politics. But yeah.
Key military aid arrives late or not at all, and vital support systems are either inadequate or delayed, leaving Ukraine to fend off a superior force with inferior, dwindling resources. While NATO's eastward expansion, despite assurances to the contrary, sowed the seeds of this conflict, we want to be clear.
What? Israel's Ukraine in this situation? Hamas attacked first. Israel's defending itself? Wait, what? What? Bro, this is my favorite type of guy who is like, Ukraine is in the right, which, you know, I agree. And also Israel is in the right. This is directly mainlining American State Department propaganda. These are the most unique individuals. They are obviously the most common individuals in American politics in general, like those in positions of power. But they are the most unique individuals when you even look at like the American population. Like across the board, this is not like a universally shared value. Most people are pro-Ukraine and pro-Palestine in this situation. Yeah, it's Jake Sullivan in the chat.
Clear that this does not justify Russia's invasion. It's simply the explanation given by Russia, and it's our job to report that. Regardless, the initial shock of Russia's invasion was met with global condemnation and a rush of military aid to Ukraine. But as the conflict dragged on and successes became fewer and farther between, enthusiasm began to wane. This shift became starkly evident after October 7, 2023, when the West's focus suddenly diverted for no conceivable reason, causing aid and support to Ukraine to become inconsistent. Meanwhile, Ukrainian ground forces faced severe shortages of manpower and ammunition, compounded by relentless Russian bombardment.
Pro-Israel and pro-Russia is the most unique one. Haven't seen that in the wild. That's one, the Republican Party. Okay. And two, everyone in Russia. And three, everyone in Israel. Not everyone in Israel, but most people in Israel. That's like that's a pretty commonly shared perspective in both Russia and in Israel, and also the American Republican Party to a certain degree. And in India, oh yeah, that's another, yep, there you go. Is really rare outside of America law is not as common as you think in Russia. What, being pro-Russia and pro-Israel? Pro-Palestine and pro-Russia is the rarest one, to be honest. It's the pro-Palestine, pro-Russia is the Jackson Hinkle, the Jackson Hinkle side of the equation. I would say pro-Palestine and pro-Russia also is like every non-aligned nation, like most of the African nations, most of the countries that are like most of the countries that I would say are victims to American imperialism historically. Okay, you're exaggerating a little. It's mostly the Russian population in Israel. Most Israelis, especially liberals and shit, are pro-Ukraine from what I know, though I don't have poll numbers at the top of my head. Yeah, the BRICS enjoyers are the pro-Palestine, pro-Russia people. Pro-Palestine, pro-Russia is the Al-Mayadeen take. It's basically just fuck America everywhere I see it take. Yeah. Which is a, significant number of people.
Bombardments targeting critical infrastructure. Cities like Kharkiv and regions in Donetsk Oblast have seen fierce battles, with Ukrainian defenses crumbling under sustained Russian pressure. The war has also taken a toll on Ukraine's economy and civilian infrastructure, leading to widespread power outages and further complicating their defense efforts. The promises of unyielding support from the West, the US in particular, have proven empty as always. With key allies showing reluctance to fully commit to mere sanctions, it's looking increasingly likely that Ukraine and the West will have to negotiate a settlement that cedes territory to Russia. Only time will tell the specifics, but what is now abundantly clear is that the United States' promises of total victory will not come to fruition. Episodes like this one are made possible thanks to our generous patrons on Patreon. If you'd like to help support the show and get some great perks while you're at it, consider becoming a patron. Perks include access to our Discord server, early access to videos, ad-free episodes, and more. You can help us keep the channel afloat by becoming a patron at patreon.com/firstthought. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.